In 1975, after more than a decade of American troops fighting in Southeast Asia, the United States pulled out of Vietnam. The images of that final pullout remain seared into the memories of many who lived through it. The final helicopters landing on the roof of the U.S. Embassy to evacuate personnel, the final flights of those choppers as they left, and pilots flying over the sea, then jumping out, ditching the choppers in the water so that they would not fall into the hands of the North Vietnamese. But there is another part to that story that has faded from the history books. Thousands of Vietnamese people, many of whom had worked and helped the U.S. forces during the war, left abandoned as those final choppers flew away. Here's CBS's Ed Bradley reporting from Saigon on April 30th, 1975.
We all decided to try and reach the United States Embassy, and once there, we found it surrounded by Vietnamese looking for a way in and a way out. Helicopters were landing on the roof and inside the compound as we walked to the back of the embassy. We had to push and shove our way through a crowd of several hundred Vietnamese trying to scale the walls, only to be knocked back by U.S. Marines.
That was not the last time the U.S. left people who had helped us behind at the end of a foreign war. When the U.S. pulled out of Iraq, we left thousands of Iraqis behind as well. In 2018, only 2 interpreters were allowed to enter the U.S. The ones who were not faced threats of attack, and there's no official way to know what happened to most of them. And now there's every possibility it could happen again, this time in Afghanistan. President Biden has said he wants all American forces out of Afghanistan by September 11th, putting an end to America's longest war. But the moment he made that pledge, Taliban forces ramped up their attacks. Most now expect they will again control all or most of the country as soon as the last U.S. forces are gone. And once again, our exit endangering the people who helped us. Thousands of Afghans are pleading for help to get them out, and many, they've been already threatened with their and their families' lives. And for more on the efforts to help them, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, we turn to Jeremy Butler. Jeremy, the CEO of the group working to help as many Afghans as possible. He's kind enough to give us a few minutes. And Jeremy, first, talk about what some of these folks did for us in country, and both helping to bridge a divide with some obviously Afghanis that were doubtful of the reasons why we were there, and let alone helping the men and women in our uniform on the ground.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you for leading with that question, because I think it's the most vital part of this discussion. These interpreters were absolutely vital to the success of the U.S. mission in Afghanistan and Iraq, for that matter. We're talking about both countries, really, although Afghanistan has the headlines right now because of the withdrawal. But these interpreters were absolutely vital. They stood shoulder to shoulder with U.S. forces, going literally into battle with them without weapons. They had some ballistic vests and things like that, but no weapons, but going in to fights with our service members to make sure that when they came on target, when they ran into an Afghani, be that a good person or a bad person, they were able to translate and let them know what they were saying, gain intelligence, learn if there were further attacks coming. They literally saved the lives of U.S. service members on a regular basis, and we promised them that we would follow up with getting them visas to bring them back to the U.S. because we knew that they were putting their lives on line, not just by going into battle with us, but by the very nature of working with the U.S. forces, not just their own lives, but the lives of their families. And so we saw what happened in Iraq when we left the translators behind. We know it's going to happen again, and it's absolutely vital that we take this action now.
And speak to the idea of a promise, Jeremy, because it wasn't just with a wink and a nod. We said we were going to take care of these people.
Exactly. And that trickled all the way down to the most junior personnel in the field. And I think it was vital. That promise was vital to getting the support of these allies on the ground. They knew that they were risking their lives. They wanted to fight for the betterment of their country, but they knew that there was a huge risk in doing so. And it was the U.S. promise that I think allowed them to have the support of their families to be able to carry out this risky work. So to back out on that promise now, this isn't just something where it's putting individual lives on the line. This is really a stain on the U.S. government and on the U.S. as a country. We absolutely have to follow through on our promises to our allies, or that's going to affect trying to get allies in the future. And allies are incredibly important in this part of the world, especially because we have so little basic knowledge about things that go on there. So if we're not following through on our promises, this is going to echo for a long, long time.
Jeremy, you've obviously forgotten more than I'll ever know on this, but from my limited conversation with guys on the ground that were in Afghanistan, what struck me was a lot of the translators, sure, I mean, jobs are hard to come by in Afghanistan, but they weren't just doing it for a buck. They believed they were helping with the future of their country. And it's not some suits in Washington with some debate here. The guys who wore a uniform in country are some of the strongest advocates to help these folks out in Afghanistan. The people who should know best were the ones that were there, who don't look at this as some Republican or Democrat issue or even immigration issue. They said, if not for this guy, I don't know what would have happened to me. We don't know what we were walking into. These guys helped make sure that, we got back home, at the end of the night to our barracks. So what struck me was the forward-facing troops on the ground are the ones saying most, you got to do right by these people.
Absolutely. I'm glad you touched on that because there's a few really important things there. One, this is not a partisan issue. This isn't something that's coming out only because of the recent announced withdrawal. This really doesn't have to do with the withdrawal. It has to do with the promise that we made, and the fact that their lives are at risk if we don't follow through with our promise. It's becoming urgent now because of the withdrawal, but this is not new. This also shouldn't be considered a regular immigration type issue. These are potential incredible American citizens who have dedicated their lives to supporting the U.S. as well as supporting Afghanistan, a bright, democratic, free and fair Afghanistan. They really were putting their lives on the line. And these people have been vetted, I think, more so than any immigrant possibly can be vetted. And that's by being vetted by the nature of combat. They absolutely stood shoulder to shoulder with American allies. If they ever had any intention of doing anything harmful to the U.S., they had many opportunities to do it long before this. So this absolutely is not political. It's not really a question of immigration. It's a question of domestic policy. These are the type of people that we want becoming U.S. citizens. These are the type of immigrants that everyone should want.
Jeremy, it's also not a question of if, but when, in that there's already been communicated threats to these folks that, hey, when the U.S. troops leave, we will kill you, we will kill your family. For a lot of these folks, it's not that they're wondering what could happen to them. They've been told to their face by the Taliban and others, we're going to come and get you.
Not just get them, get their families. And these aren't just threats. Too many have already been killed by the Taliban because of their support to the U.S. We already are losing this mission because we've waited so long. These are promises that we made as many as 20 years ago to many of these that we fought alongside with in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is not something new. This is not something hypothetical. This is something that we know is going to happen because it's already happened. And so every day that we delay is putting more lives on the line.
So, Jeremy, to me, I don't know how this is a debate. There's a right thing to do here. It seems pretty simple on its face. But for anybody who's queasy to say, well, we don't know who these people are, forgetting what they've done in working in service of at least the U.S. military's goals there, the idea would be we would resettle them in Guam, a U.S. territory, and then vet them to make sure that they should be part of the American fabric. We do have a check and balance here to make sure that these people, would be additive to this country.
Absolutely. And the checks, frankly, have already been done. They wouldn't have been going into battle with our service members if they hadn't already been vetted. Most of them have already been cleared for this visa process. It's just that the U.S. hasn't followed through on actually bringing them to the U.S. You mentioned Guam. We kind of refer to it as the Guam option, but Guam is just one possibility. Guam was used after Vietnam to resettle immigrants. It's being put out as an option now, but it doesn't have to be Guam. Really what we're just talking about is, okay, if the problem here is concern that we need to do more vetting of these Afghanis, then great. Let's find a U.S. location, maybe it's another country even that's willing to help us out here, where we can bring them, get them out of harm's way, and then do the vetting process as necessary. But really, there are many ways that we can solve this problem, but the biggest thing that we need to do is take action. And that's why we're working with groups like No One Left Behind and Veterans for American Ideals to push the administration to take action. The Department of Defense knows about this. The chairman and the Secretary of Defense were both asked questions about this just this week in a press conference. They are standing by to carry out the mission. I think what we really need to do is we need to keep the press on to the administration and to Congress to take action immediately.
We got a lot of complicated debates in this country, but This isn't one of them. We gave our word. They did right by us. It's the right thing to do. Jeremy Butler, I appreciate you making time for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the time.